Hey everybody, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Wendy Yee.
I'm Chris Yee.
And today we're reviewing The White Castle, which has nothing to do with burgers, and that's the last time I'm ever going to acknowledge that combination, I think, for the rest of the year. I'm done with it. I'm tired of talking about White Castle and people go, but how do they taste? This is about an actual historical White Castle that was built in 1761, or was in use in 1761. I know you want to make jokes, but...
No, not particularly. Hegemony Castle is like a very important thing. I really like the art, the look of this, and De Vere's small box kind of strategy line impresses me, so I was very interested in it.
I've also never eaten a White Castle burger, so I have no interest in that.
There we go. So let's talk about this game. We'll be right back.
Here we have the White Castle. This is where we're trying to earn influence by taking our family members right here and inserting them into society. So we want them in the White Castle, we want them on the bridges, and we want them on the proving grounds over here. The game takes place across 3 rounds, and each one of these rounds, there will be 3 actions per player based on these dice. First, I want to start by talking about how to earn victory points in this game. So you have the bridges over here where you're placing your farmers. You have the castle where you're placing your courtiers up here. And then finally, you have the proving grounds where you're going to be placing your soldiers. Placing your farmers over here in the bridges area costs food, so it's whatever the cost is on the upper right. You gain victory points based on what is in the bottom left, and then you immediately get the benefit of this action. Also, at the end of the round, if there happens to be 1 dice left on your bridge, you can take this action a second time. Next, we have the courtier action. Now this over here, moving up in the castle, you can pay $2 to put a courtier in the gate, and then you can pay 2 to 5 pearls to be able to move up either 1 or 2 levels on the castle. As you move up, you get to gain a few benefits. 1, there's endgame points based on what level this particular person is at the end of the game, as well as you get to collect the card that is in whatever room you choose. This card replaces the current card that you have on your action board over here, and then the previous card that was there becomes an income when you take this action. You also get to take one of the white benefits that's on the card that you place, giving you extra things like 3 good resources. Finally, the proving grounds over here also give you benefits. You have to pay the cost in the bottom left-hand corner over here. You gain whatever benefit is showing on these top tiles, and then at the end of the game, you will gain points based on this scoring down here. So for the amount of workers that you have, this particular space gives you 2 points per courtier in the castle. So currently we have 1 green courtier. We have 2 of these guys, so that would be worth 4 points right now. So you may be saying, okay, Wendy, so how do I actually get my workers out and what does a turn look like? Well, a basic turn is drafting one of these dice from the bridge. You can either take the lowest die, which gives you this action right here, it's a little bonus, and you can take all of the resources shown over here. Or you can take the higher die, which doesn't give you any bonus, but it is a higher die. Now, wherever you choose to place dice will determine the amount of money you either spend or gain. If you overpay, so for example, this die is higher than this number, then I will get money back. So I would get $2 here. Whereas if I underpaid right here, I would actually have to pay $1, so I would pay the difference. Placing dice into the castle will determine based on color which actions you can take. So you can take both red actions here, whereas on your player board, it will also determine by the color, but it's going to give you everything in the row. So you would get 3 food here, and then you would get to take a castle action. A couple other spaces that you can go to with your dice. Right down here we have the well. Now the well allows you to get a daimyo plus whatever these tokens are showing. These tokens are just part of setup. They won't change throughout the game. Now, one thing that's special about this area is that it's always considered a 1. Now, if you're playing a 3 or 4 player game, when you're in different areas, you can actually stack dice on top of each other up to 2 high. And you would pay the cost or gain the benefit in coins based on what the current die is showing. So for example, I'd have to pay 4 coins here. However, if I'm at the well, because the well is always considered a 1, this right here would actually be a free action. Finally, the last space that you can go is over here. We have all the basic actions where you place out the meeples. You can place down one of your dice and take either one of the adjacent options. So once again, players are going to be drafting across the round eventually 3 dice, 1 at a time per turn. Is going to be 3 general rounds throughout the game. And then at the end of the game, players are going to count up points. points come from the bridge cards. They come from where you are at in the castle. They come with the multipliers for the proving grounds, as well as this influence track up here. This will determine player order at the end of each round, as well as these endgame points. And then finally, your resources, your daimios, your coins, all of those will have a conversion at the end of the game. And that's how you play the White Castle.
Chris mentioned small box, but look. This
Painstakingly to close that, right?
Look, I think DeVere is on fire with their small box series and with their big box series, actually, too. Lacrimosa and the games like that. Their small box doesn't have to be this small. In fact, they're not even all the same size, we figured out. We were putting them next to each other. And this should have been in a Ticket to Ride size box. It barely fits in here.
I felt the same way about Bamboo.
See, I could justify Bamboo. I'm having a harder time with this one. And I know that's because we put one of our component bins in there, and I think...
We'll put our
There
component
should be
bin in
able to
there.
be a little bit of space. And the bridges, it's hard not to get them damaged, actually.
That's where my biggest complaint. If you give me a nice piece like that, which I think is wonderful, I think it adds to the aesthetic of the game. It has a nice place for things to be, the dice that you're drafting, and it has doesn't really have a mechanical purpose, but it does a nice job of separating, towards the two
are
ends.
available, yeah.
If you're going to provide those things, a little more space.
I want to be clear, though, that's my only negative about the components. I think the art looks great. I think it's a small, functional-looking game. I don't think anyone walking by the table is like, wow. But it works. The symbology works in the game. I felt like it was easy. It seemed like a game that would be difficult to understand, but once I got the flow of teaching it, it was not.
One thing for me is that I think these smaller box games take the crunchiness of a heavier Euro and they tend to put them in a slightly quicker game.
Sure.
And so this ended quicker than I thought it was going to end because I thought of it as one of the DeVere bigger box games. But then I was like, oh, and it's over. 3 rounds. Hey, that's it. Like 3 rounds, 3 actions per round, done. Given I played it at 2, which is very different than if you played at 4, it's just a longer game.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, in that regard, I warn people. I'm like, you have 9 actions. And I think that's fine because your action, eventually you're like, I'm taking this action, which gives me this action, which gives me another action. You're really taking more than 9 actions. It does make going to the well feel like a big dud. You're a big doofus for going to the well, and then Wendy does 4 actions.
Unless one of my 4 actions happens to be a bonus to go to the well.
No, that's different. That's
Then
fine.
that's totally worth it,
That's
yeah.
worth it.
But sometimes you need money.
I know.
Those dice roll low. There's not a better way to get money.
You need the money. Sometimes you are low on those Imperial Seals that you get from the well, and then the little 2 bonuses, right? Like that's... It doesn't feel great to go there, but you can, depending on the setup of the game, avoid going there at all. But
Which I have.
yeah, but man, setup really is going to depend. Depends if are there other ways to get consistent money flow. That's I think what makes it a little bit trickier. So it is a game you have to read kind of what's the opening setup, but then even at that, certain parts of it will change over the course of the game.
One thing that I liked was the level of interaction. So I'm one of those people that's perfectly happy with multiplayer solitaire. I think it's beautiful, it's fine. But this has more interaction than that with the dice drafting and with the placement of the dice. But I feel like it wasn't too much for someone that's more on my side of things. I liked that when you're pulling off those dice, you're determining, one, what those farmers are going to get to play at the end of the round. Like if they get that extra
Yes, that
bonus
can be
action,
really
that can be
nasty.
huge, or it can be really mean. Also, you're determining what dice pops up, whether it's going to go lower or higher, which I'm not sure if I added that in the overview, but those middle dice move either lower or higher depending on which dice you pull. And so you could make that 5 really cheap, and then you're giving someone that bonus of like, ooh, I can draft that 5 and get that extra income action, that like lantern thing. Like there's some cool decisions there, but it's not too much for me.
I like that action so much. Whenever there's a game that rolls dice and the values in the dice mean something, in this case they do money-wise, right? Mm-hmm. I want there to be a way to mitigate low rolls. And so many games just are like, it's fine. It's not fine. In this game, it's great because I'll take a low one. I'll be like, but I get a bonus, and that bonus gets better as the game goes by.
Yeah.
Which after a while, you're deliberately taking low dice, and then you got to be careful. I don't want to take a weird interaction thing is I'll take this 2 die, whatever, and then the 4 slides over, and I'm like, oh, I just gave you a 4, and it's on the low side of the bridge. What have I done? And that's that plus the, hey, take another bonus action. I like that combo. It makes the game really fun to play.
Yeah.
And when you get into that farmer phase, right, you invest in putting the people out there, at the end of the round, you likely can fire those off if there's still dice on those bridges. And so it is a game of 9 actions. You draft 9 dice, but those are a lot of times basically guaranteed extra actions if you invest in them. Or maybe you'll invest instead moving up the castle, or you'll invest in the samurai training grounds. And so I like that you can do a lot. You'll never do everything, but it is kind of that feeling of like, do I want to go really farmer heavy? They are worth points at the end of the game. That's good. And bonus actions. Do I kind of go heavy in the same area or spread them out? There's a lot of decisions in what we're describing as not too complex of a game, and not, especially at a 2-player count, an incredibly quick game.
Well, and then depending on what those meeples that you put out, they don't give you resources for their action they unlock. They don't give you resources that benefit them. So, for example, the Proving Grounds requires iron, but you have to put out farmers to get the iron based on that action. And so I really like that those help you put out different meeples as you take those actions and as you unlock those resources.
Yeah, there's a lot in this game. I don't think it's as big of a game as it seems after a while, because you are in multiple players, you're going to see the same stuff again and again. You're going to see the same kinds of farmers. You definitely see the synergy. But I think that's fine. I think it's a medium game that feels heavier. It's not, I wouldn't call it a heavy game, but it's definitely not light by any means either.
Yeah.
I do have one problem, and that's with the 4-player game. The downtime, I think, is too much, because you can literally do nothing on your turn to plan ahead, because you do not know what dice are available for you.
You said nothing on your turn. I was like, what?
No, I mean, I'm sorry.
Plan ahead.
You can do nothing on someone else's turn. Let me rephrase that. You can do nothing on someone else's turn to plan ahead.
Okay.
I can't pick the dice. I can just sit there and wince as you go towards the die. And I'm like, no. The cards' actions are going to change in between your turns. And the game is really fun when you're playing. So you're like, ooh, I'll do this. I'll do a bonus action. Ooh, I can do this action. Oh, wait. I need that resource. Let me roll back a bit, and I'm going to do this action. And that's all fun while you're doing it, not fun watching it. And my first game of this was 4, and I was like, that's interminable downtime. And then 3 was much more reasonable. It was, we lowered the game downtime by 33%. That's a big deal. I would not play this one more than 3. However, 3 is a little bit different than 2 because you're putting dice on top of each other, the stacking of dice.
Yeah.
But I think 2 is still fine because it's just it's going to be a much faster, it's going to be one of your fastest heavy Euro games you play in a sense.
And in that way, it reminds me of Bamboo. It's something that's not a big, sprawling, heavy game. I see why they're going for this kind of smaller, medium-sized box, because I like all those aspects about it. As you said, with 3 players being able to stack dice on top of each other. That's also another interesting point where drafting a lower die and putting it somewhere means that you've now lowered the value of that spot. So putting a 5 over a 2 means that you're netting coins. So there's good, small little points of interaction for a game that's really not what I would call like interactive.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Now, and same thing with Bamboo. This is a game that I would play at 4 with quick players, and I would be a lot less likely to play at 4 with slow players. Like, it just really depends on the type of people you're playing with.
Yeah, and I'm not even blaming the players in this case. It's because I have done the same thing where I have done this to this to this and go, oh, I don't have a coin. Hang on. And then you got to roll everything back because there's several things that you did, the bonus actions. And there's very rarely I go, I only have one good choice. There's a lot of good choices to make. So you can do that, especially as the cards get changed and you're like, ooh. And it has a weird turn order track, which you both love and hate because it doesn't really feel like anything until you don't go first. It's nauseating to not go first. But also, you get a lot of points as farther you move down it. So there's a lot of neat concepts.
Was it Iki that we played that we felt like the 2-player, the turn order tracker didn't didn't have a lot of
Yeah.
weight.
Yeah, it wasn't good at
Whereas
2. This one.
this one, I definitely felt like because that turn order tracker was worth points at the end of the game, it made it worth us, the influence track, made it worth it. So in a 2-player game that was dynamic, we were switching first player regularly.
Yeah, but I want that die before other people. I want the card sometimes before other people.
Yes.
What would you rate it?
I'm coming in at an 8. This one's a ton of fun. It feels almost too short, but I think that it is ultimately the right length because you can do a lot. You can get a lot of your farmers and your warriors and stuff out there. You can build what feels like a good engine. But sometimes, like you said, taking a lesser turn doesn't feel as good. That being said, it's quick enough. You can just kind of set it up again, play it again. I think that it does a lot, and I think for this setting, for this nice visual look that it has, it doesn't lose that kind of calm and sereneness while also having that tension of watching people take a die that you want. But as soon as it's your turn, you start doing an action, you kind of chain things together, set yourself up for the future. There's a lot of fun that comes from that. So I really like it. It's an 8.
It's an 8 for me also, with not 4. With 4, it'd be 7 or maybe even 6. But with 2 or 3, it's an 8. I really like, the game is just letting you do fun things. And I like that a lot. And the bridge concept just is such a neat concept. And as dumb as those 3-dimensional bridges might be and closing this box on them, they work. That's a nice function. Slide the die to the one end of the bridge. I never have to wonder stuff. I just look at it. And there's a lot of black, orange, and white in the game, and it's themeless beyond belief, right? I know nothing more about the White Castle than when I started.
There's a gate.
You're trying to add influence to society.
Like soldiers, courtiers, farmers. The farmers might make a little make sense, but that's fine. I just had fun with the mechanisms.
I'm giving this a solid 8.5. I think it was fabulous. I enjoyed it. Like Chris said, I could handle another round or maybe an extra action per round or something. Like I could handle a little bit more of this game to really thoroughly enjoy that engine. But at the same time, I was still content with where it ended. And I really loved just the way that you used those dice to get one action after another, to be able to build that engine of your income, to be able to change up the actions that you got on your player board with that card. Like there's just so many cool things and you want to do it all and you can do a lot of it. And so I thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah, 8.5 for me.
Well, there you go, folks. That's The White Castle. I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Wendy Yee.
I'm Chris Yee.
We'll see you next time.